With the Trump administration defending its plan targeting low-income legal immigrants. It's basically become a new flashpoint, a full defense of this rather unusual change to immigration policy, an attempt to punish legal immigrants if they participate in legal programs like getting food assistance or participating in Medicaid. Now, Donald Trump's top immigration official, Ken Cuccinelli, saying today the Statue of Liberty poem should basically, in his words, be kind of rewritten based on this new Trump policy. It requires immigrants to prove they're unlikely to ever need any public assistance.
Would you also agree that Emma Lazarus's words etched on the Statue of Liberty, "Give me your tired, your poor," are also part of the American ethos?
They certainly are. Give me your tired and your poor who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge.
It's very Trumpy what you're hearing there, because it's kind of a trolling. Trump's immigration chief, who's responsible for these very real powers, saying, sure, give me your tired and your poor, but appending his own addition, stand on their own 2 feet. Now, that's striking enough because a lot of people feel a lot of sentimentality for at least the rhetoric, if not the reality, of the Statue of Liberty's goals. But it's also, we have to note for you, very different from just hours before when he commented on the very same topic. Take a listen.
You were implementing a public charge rule for the first time. Is that sentiment, give us your tired, your poor, still operative in the United States, or should those words come down? Should the plaque come down off the Statue of Liberty?
Well, I'm certainly not prepared to take anything down off the Statue of Liberty.
Give me your tired and your poor who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge.
Tangle with the popularity of the Statue of Liberty at your own peril. Mr. Cuccinelli saying he's not going to take it down, and then now taking it down and putting up his own revisions. Now, this is not just obviously a rhetorical discussion. That's not why it's leading the news tonight. This is very, very real. And this attempt to sort of defend the targeting of low-income legal immigrants comes with a context. It comes, of course, after these heartbreaking accounts that emerged from the fallout of the massive ICE raid that left many families separated and left up this public cry, call it testimony if you want, that we've all heard now, and that's worth hearing again from an 11-year-old girl in tears.
I need my dad for me. My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal.
Today, NBC's Gabe Gutierrez interviewed the acting ICE director, asking for reaction to that very video.
We conduct our operations with professionalism, with compassion, and with humanity, and we try our best to minimize the impact on the innocent people of this situation. However, we have to enforce the law. The parents or the individuals that are breaking the law are ultimately the ones that are responsible for placing their children in this situation.
You see the very different ways to defend these policies. Cuccinelli picking a fight with poetry, the acting ICE director talking up compassion, blaming the parents. Now, just think for a second. Would compassion and professionalism involve a process where there was communication when you have a minor who is now separated from her parents? I put that question to you with this reporting. 5 days later, she doesn't know where her father is. Now, this immigration policy is the reality right now. Raids that leave these children in tears in the wake of a mass shooting targeting Latinos. No effort to communicate with people about the realities of those folks who are now separated. Ripping children away from their parents at the border. There's a new court filing from the ACLU that says that family separation policy is still very much on, while the Trump administration has claimed it's not. Speaker Pelosi is speaking out on this effort. She says it is to demonize and terrorize immigrants. She calls these new policies that have come out here while Congress is on recess hateful and bigoted. Trump's border chief, Ken Cuccinelli, who we actually profiled on this show when he was up for this job for his extremely conservative record, is pushing back himself. He says, as you heard, it's not too much to ask migrants to be, quote, self-sufficient. So before I turn to the panel, I want to leave one final thought on all of this news you've just heard as it all jumbles together. Mr. Cuccinelli is carrying out the Trump plan, the Trump agenda. And that idea that everyone must be self-sufficient, it misreads America in two ways. First, there is nothing wrong with people who happen to receive federal benefits sometimes. whether they're seniors on Social Security or veterans who get health insurance or workers who get unemployment insurance because they've lost a job by no fault of their own in a recession or a corporate decision, or children who get food assistance. Let's just take a breath and remember, there is no insult, no failing in participating in those programs at some point in your life. It's part of our social safety net, long funded and operated, if you want to get political, by, yes, administrations in both parties. Then there's the immigration piece of this. Second, America's ethic has strived to welcome people regardless of what they look like or what they make. In fact, when it does come to struggle, when that is a part of the analysis of where people are coming from and what they went through, our rhetoric and our asylum policies have long noted that sometimes it's the people in the most trouble who need America. And while we don't let them all in, that's not the rule. We can't let them all in, say many politicians. And while we haven't always lived up as a country to that goal, we've certainly strived for it. We've certainly talked about it. That's why we all know the rhetoric in the Statue of Liberty poem that everyone is fighting about today. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The idea there is pretty simple. America is where some of them might get to come for a better life. Not that the door to America is completely shut unless you already have one. And with that, we turn to our talented expert panel tonight. Leah Wright Rigueur from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, Marielena Incapia, I should say, Executive Director of the National Immigration Law Center, and BBC Washington anchor, Katty Kay. Marielena, your thoughts?
Thank you, Ari. As a Latina, as an immigrant from Colombia, and as a lawyer, it is deeply offensive to hear Acting Director Cuccinelli talk about this as self-sufficiency. That's a myth about who we are as a nation. The fact is that this is the country, the land of opportunity. That is the story we have told ourselves for several centuries now. And we know that, in fact, the majority of Americans at some point in their lifetime are going to need to rely on certain types of safety net programs, whether it's unemployment, whether it's nutrition assistance, health care, whatever it is. These are anti-poverty programs for that very reason. They're anti-poverty. They're meant to help people make ends meet when they're facing a hard time, which was my own family's experience when we first arrived in this country in the 1970s from Colombia.
Leah, listen to the president on all this today.
Maybe there ought to be a different poem on the Statue of Liberty. Do you think that should be changed? Well, I don't think it's fair to have the American taxpayer. You know, it's about America first. I don't think it's fair to have the American taxpayer paying for people to come into the United States.
Leah?
Well, you know, Ari, I think cruelty is the point. That much is apparent. And the president is being explicit about it now. This isn't about the law. If it was about the law and if it was about taxpayers and things like that, we'd actually see that the corporations that are involved in bringing people over or these rules, that the government would be paying attention to them. They're not. We see that all the time. Instead, what we see is that this is about Donald Trump's, quest to make America look a very particular way. He was very honest about that in that statement he just gave to the press. This isn't about bringing America back to, say, the 1960s or the 1970s. This is looking more and more like bringing America back to the age of, 1924 and the Johnson-Reed Act. It is about making a certain kind of America, one in which it's not just undocumented immigrants who are targeted, but also legal immigrants who are from particular backgrounds, who are of certain ages, who are from certain countries. That much is clear.
I didn't know you wanted to go there, get into the Johnson-Reed Act. We could do that, Professor. You're referring to the last time that the federal law explicitly acknowledged that kind of discrimination, which was later revised in '65, not perfected by any means, but at least the government was no longer on record admitting that it was going to ban people based on, for example, national origin from Asia, or in religion with quotas against Jews. What do you see as the way they're kind of giving the game away and how far back they want to go in these policies?
I mean, so immigration reform in this country has been far from perfect, particularly in the last 20 years. But one of the things that is striking, really striking about the Trump administration is the rhetoric and the language that around immigration and how that is tied explicitly to policy. So Donald Trump saying that Mexico is sending its worst, sending rapists and sending drug dealers, saying that Mexican drugs are discriminatory, making racist statements around that, using language about invasion, about a coming horde, about the dangers of migrants, that, and then explicitly tying it to policy that for all purposes really is about excluding people from this country and about creating a system that, since it can't be done through Congress and hasn't been done through Congress, really kills immigration, legal and undocumented immigration. But I want to pay particular attention to the legal portion of this. Legal immigration through 1,000 backdoor cuts. And that part is important and that part is different.
Very well put, and appreciate both of your erudition. Stay with me. I'm turning here in New York to Katty Kay. I don't think it's a secret to regular viewers that you happen to be from somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm an immigrant in this country, first-generation immigrant. I pay taxes, so I am effectively a taxpayer in this country. It might surprise many Americans to know that actually a lot of illegal immigrants also pay taxes in this country. So I think the idea that this is something to do with taxes or welfare is a total red herring.
And that's what I want to drill down with you on, which is who is being targeted. So, and let me have, for your analysis, Ken Cuccinelli, pressed with that question. Well, wait a minute. It has now become quite clear that certain groups are being targeted. Targeting the poor has always, at least since '65, been, if not before, disfavored. And targeting people by where they're from and what they look like is supposed to be unconstitutional. Take a listen.
Why shouldn't the Latino community feel targeted by this?
This is not new. This was the same question might have been asked when my Italian immigrants were coming, immigrant ancestors were coming, and all through that 140 years. This will apply across the world.
This will apply to more Latinos than any other, likely more Latinos?
Well, if we had been having this conversation 100 years ago, it would have applied to more Italians.
I'm going to make an observation and then lean towards your analysis. My observation is I'm not sure Mr. Cuccinelli is the best advocate and most convincing presenter of these ideas. It seems that every time we throw to a clip, he's putting his foot in his mouth, claiming he, by the way, not Senate confirmed or anything else, he should be rewriting the Statue of Liberty poem, and then he's making these Latino-Italian comparisons. I leave that to him. To you, I ask, is this accurate, and what is he missing?
So the idea that somehow immigrants are going to take up more welfare based on the color of their skin is already a complete misnomer, because as we know, the vast majority of recipients of food stamps in this country are white. They are not African American. They are not Hispanic. In fact, I think it's only about 10% of recipients of food stamp who are Hispanic. So let's put that to one side. The professor took us back in time. Let's jump forward in time. I think this is all about 2044, when America becomes a minority white country. And a bit like King Canute, the Trump administration is desperately trying to stop the tide of that. Stephen Miller, one of the longest standing members of the Trump administration, came into the White House wanting to target illegal immigration, yes, but wanting also right from the very beginning of this administration to target legal immigration, to try to make America in the image that the Trump administration would like to have it, which is majority white, which is why we know that they have spoken about taking Norwegians and not people from African countries and not people from Hispanic countries. This is about race. It's about keeping America white. It's not about welfare. It's not about taxes. And it's not about economics.
Maria Elena?
Yeah, completely agree. In fact, I would say that not only is this not about welfare, because what this racially motivated rule does not do is change the eligibility rules about immigrant access to nutrition or health care, but what it does do is actually change the political power dynamics. What they're trying to do is have millions of immigrants not be able to become permanent residents, prevent them from becoming citizens and eventual voters. So this is their way to eventually have minority rule a country that will be majority people of color in the future.
And so this really tracks perfectly with the next question I wanted to ask the professor, which is you've also done a lot on the politics of this. And I wonder what you think about the politics here after the president has had, let's be clear, rough times even by his standards. This convicted sex offender that the Trump administration was accused of having staff who was too lenient on, then mysteriously dies in jail, with the Trump administration is overseeing that. A series of reports about his handling of these mass shootings that, while not causal, certainly had a shooter echoing language of the president and all these other problems. And here are the politics, Leah, of here we go again, what I mentioned at the top, which is the insinuation that participating in any public program, it makes you somehow suspect. And Reagan would do that in a domestic context with African Americans. We're seeing this in an immigration context. I wonder here, having covered the policy and the ethics of it, if you could walk us through your view of the political playbook here.
Well, you know, in times of crisis for Donald Trump, he very quickly falls back on the the culture wars and what amounts to the race wars and the immigration wars. So this is his favorite. This is his favorite and perhaps the easiest punching bag for him. This is how he started his campaign. This is how This is how he ran his campaign. This is what he did. What he focused on in the 2017 special elections and especially in the 2018 elections. And he's pulling it out again to try and rile up and really appeal to his base. So this is not about growing his base. This is not about that. One thing, though, that I would push back on and really think about is how often has this been successful for Donald Trump? We may point to 2016, but we can also look at 2018 and see that this idea of the so-called horde, this myth of the horde, the fear of the
Caravan,
horde, didn't actually play
Yep.
out at the Right. The caravan didn't actually play out in his favor at the ballot box. What it ended up doing is creating, playing a role in the increased frenzy and rhetoric around race that had devastating consequences, but politically didn't really pay off for him.
Leah and Maria Elena, thank you both. I really appreciate it. I have one more thing here in New York for Katty Kay, and that is Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller has maintained a tremendous amount of influence over immigration policy. He worked for Jeff Sessions. He's now outlasted Jeff Sessions. And viewers may know him as someone who isn't on camera all that much compared to some of these other officials, and yet sometimes seems to, as I mentioned, outlast and outrank the Attorney General, DHS, the border czars. It is remarkable. And so we have to deal. I mean, some people say, oh, I wish we didn't have to deal with this or that person or this or that fact. We have to deal with what's out there, whether you want to listen to Mr. Miller or not. I say that as a kind of disclaimer for viewers. Here was Mr. Miller on the very issue that now has become front and center, the Statue of Liberty, at a time when it seemed much more like a kind of a macabre blooper. Take a look.
The Statue of Liberty says, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. It doesn't say anything about speaking English or being able to be a computer programmer.
The poem that you're referring to that was added later is not actually part of the original Statue of Liberty, but more fundamentally, the history, more fundamentally,
you're saying
the
that
history.
That does not represent.
I'm saying that the notion. I'm saying the notion that I'm saying the notion.
Stephen, I'm sorry.
No,
Jim.
Let me ask you a question.
That sounds like some national park revisionism.
2017, and that was something they backed off of because they didn't want to go to war with the Statue of Liberty. Is this now in the playbook? Is this now not something they're backing off? This is, from what 2017 was too extreme, is now being normalized in 2019.
So Lazarus's poem goes on to say, give us your wretched refuse and your homeless. It's very hard in Stephen Miller's America, the Stephen Miller's ideal America, to imagine this White House embracing the wretched refuse and the homeless of the world. They have normalized a lot. And there is this battle going on and continuously over the wall. They haven't managed to build the wall. They are trying through other means to satisfy the base on immigration policy. But specifically what's new here is this idea of targeting legal immigrants. And that is Stephen Miller. That's something he has wanted to do. I've heard him say it right from the very beginning of this administration. And now he feels with this order that he can do it. It'll be challenged in the courts.
We always learn from you when you're here, and you just put your finger on it, that they have slowly but finally moved from talking about the undocumented, where there is a legal line, to actually admitting, no, they don't like, and I say this if you don't mind, check me if you do, they don't want certain people who have your status, who are just legally here, participating in our economy, we learn from, we listen to, paying taxes, as you mentioned. Now they're saying the fact that you came here itself, it should be targeted.
Yeah, I have 4 American kids who are Americans and Brits. I have an American-British husband, so I find it hard to believe that I will be chucked out, but I am very conscious of the fact that people who come who don't look like me, who come with more difficult circumstances than to this country where you have always welcomed migrants. It has been the value of America. It is the thing that distinguishes this country from other countries, and I fear that's going.
We really appreciate your clarity here. Katty Kay, always good to have you on. And my thanks to all of our guests. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.